Good evening and welcome to Spanish United Radio. I'm your host Enrique Sanchez. This evening we have a very special guest. Can you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Hello.
Yes.
My name is Dr. Sandfish.
Welcome, Dr. Janfish. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you so very much. I'm really happy to be here.
We recently met on the Scandinavian um, program. You know that is found that was started by the Scandinavian community. And I wanted to ask a little bit about your background and how long you have been teaching at Cal State Northridge, and you know what are the things that you have seen, in students that you think could be examples in getting them to read more.
Ah, uh, I have been at Cal State Northridge very happily since fall of 1979. I was hired in after having had experience teaching in community colleges and completing my doctoral degree in early childhood and developmental studies at UCLA. And at Northridge, I was hired in as the coordinator of the BA in early childhood child development. And later, in 1994, I was recruited to the faculty of the master's program in early childhood education at Cal State Northridge. I'm currently Professor Emerita. That means that I've formally retired. However, I continue to teach at Cal State Northridge a consultation class in early childhood in the master's program.
Okay, so that means basically that you are retired as a professor, but you have a senior position in the university still.
Yes, I still teach one course a semester.
That's nice, awesome. Yeah,
Yes.
I think it's very important that today, particularly in the Hispanic community, like my organization, Spanish United, we've been around for 6 years. We have five chapters in different states, and one of the challenges that we have in Spanish United is to get children to read, Latino children to read. And one of the questions that I ask many parents and many Hispanic students is that many parents don't read to their children because primarily they work so much. Others don't have time. Some say that they feel that reading is expensive because many parents have to buy books and books are not cheap. That's another issue. And also many children say that they don't see themselves in books, meaning that they don't see any characters or any people that they could relate to, because most storybook characters that children read are usually Caucasian or Asian or some mythical figure. So, like, what can be done to change the narrative to get Hispanic students and children to read, because there is a crisis of illiteracy among Hispanics in the United States.
I do believe that there is a crisis for others also, especially since the pandemic and since so much has been done in education over Zoom during that time and following that time. And then I would like to start by saying that in Spanish, it's critically important that the parents hold on to the home language, period, and to speak with their children in Spanish or in any indigenous language from a Latin American country, so that communication, that cord between generations is not cut.
Hmm. Because right now, with forced assimilation and shaming of the Spanish language, many children even feel shame even speaking Spanish. Like many children whose parents are immigrants, many of them don't speak English, and every time their children speak to them in Spanish, it's like a shame because our society has made it shameful or even dirty, to even speak the
Yes.
Spanish language. Like I remember a long time ago, Newt Gingrich, who was the former Speaker of the House, said
Oh
that the
yes.
Spanish language was the language of the ghetto, and for someone who was a public figure, that really sends a message that Spanish is not a language of prosperity, but a language of the slums.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that kind of linguistic prejudice and oppression has been seen in Latin America and in the United States and in Spain for hundreds of years, if not millennia.
Mm-hmm.
During the time of Franco in Spain, if you spoke Catalan in your region of Catalonia, Franco said, "Do not speak like a dog."
Mm-hmm.
So it is horrendous, no matter how long it has persisted across the globe, and certainly now we're talking about the United States. And right now we're in a dip that is almost like a whiplash from a time when we thought we were becoming more inclusive, including language inclusive. We have in California a biliteracy initiative, understanding that what Napoleon said is a man with two languages is twice a man. And I'm going to take it away from Napoleon because he said man, but I, I do think that it is very true. We know that cognitively, if you speak a home language and you're learning another language in school, you are fortifying your mental development in both languages and in your proficiency in both languages.
Absolutely, and I could see like in other countries where you have more than one language as an official language, those countries are better off. Like for example, Switzerland, they have five official languages. They have German, they have French, they have Italian, they have English, and they also have another language called Romash, and everyone speaks it.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. And I do think that the European community, politically and, politically in terms of language policy, have fortified that across Western Europe with exchange programs for students to come from one country in Europe and study in another, for example.
Mm. And I think that's important because the more languages that people know, the better. Like that's one of the things that I want to promote in Spanish United is to get Hispanics not only to retain their language, their spoken language of Spanish, but at the same time to also learn other languages because I feel that the more they learn, the more they can earn. And right now, especially with competition for jobs, and again, I'm not knocking anyone off that works a humble job, to provide for their family, but that's something that we don't pass on from one generation to another. That's something that you do temporarily, and I feel that many Hispanic people, particularly Hispanic students, don't feel that they could really advance than just having a humble job. So like as an educator, like for example, like what advice would you give to educators that are Hispanic, or let's say a civil rights organization like myself, to get Latino children involved in literacy and to keep them learning more and not to just give up on reading.
Good. For educators, I think it is critical that they acknowledge and engage the child in their home language, even if they do not speak that home language. Ask open-ended questions so that all of the children in the classroom can both see that the teacher values that child's language and that it is bringing into the classroom words, phrases from that child's language that the other children can learn too. And that can be a bridge for forming social relationships in the classroom, as well as cognitive links from one child to another, one language to another. And in learning, we all know that word roots that pop up and sound similar to us help us link meaning, language, words, and context.
It's similar to what Chinese students do in Saint Gabriel. I do a lot of work with the Chinese
Uh-huh.
community in Saint Gabriel, and what I've seen is that not only they have language schools for their students, but at the same time they also include other students from other backgrounds to also encourage them to learn Chinese, and at the same time they could have a cultural exchange. And I feel that if we could have that with the Hispanic community, I think the Hispanic students would be able to not only have a sense of pride, but at the same time they're able to be like cultural ambassadors to their own classmates and peers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the more we can translanguage, that we can include elements of learning other people's languages and seeing all languages in the classroom, on the table, on the walls, when a teacher greets a parent dropping off a young child in an early childhood classroom or primary grade classroom, in their own language or with their name pronounced correctly. That too communicates an incredible lesson to the child as well as other children in the classroom, that is a valued language and form of communication. I would like to add a piece of research that shows how darn important it is and valuable it is to be exposed to two or more languages. There is a study done by Dr. Patricia Hewell at the University of Washington, where she had a study of 7-month-old infants in Seattle. Some of the infants were being raised in a 2-language home or more, perhaps, but at least a bilingual family where one adult spoke one language and one spoke the other, and it could have been English and Spanish or 2 other languages.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and it was monolingual children, most of whom, I believe all of whom, were English speaking and not being raised with another language in the home or in their environment. And at 7 months, these children were presented with the same task. And if you can visualize a baby lying on their tummies, and there's a tube in front of them of clear plastic, plexiglass,
Okay.
and they're given a bean bag, and they can throw the bean bag into the tube, and they try to pull it out. Some children try to pull it out the other side, but there is, what they can't see is a clear plexiglass like barrier in the middle of the tube.
Right.
incredibly larger percent of bilingual 7-month-olds will reach with one hand and throw it in and try to pull it out, but they will figure it out and eventually reach in the other side again and pull it out. The monolingual children are much, much less likely in percentages to demonstrate that cognitive problem-solving flexibility to say, oh, it doesn't work this way. I've tried it a number of times. Why don't I try the other side? And that's what happens. And for me, when I saw that study, the videos from it, I was incredibly impressed.
That just shows that when children trained, especially as infants, when they are trained to understand more than language, it programs their memory in order for them to, let's say, if they cannot process one language for whatever reason, they could process what's being told to them through an alternative language.
Yes, they've built structures in one language that they've started to apply to another. And sometimes those languages, as we well know, are very different structurally. So that is an amazing ability of the human brain that doesn't get switched on or turned on, ignited, if you will, without that exposure to language.
Absolutely, 100%. Like, one of the things that we want to do eventually in Spanish United is, like, you probably are familiar that in many cities and towns, especially like in California, I've seen that they have what's called little free libraries where people can bring books, take books, and leave meetings,
Yes.
etc. But one thing that I've noticed is that in cities and towns, not just in California, but throughout the country, you don't really see little free libraries in areas where you have a large Spanish speaking population, and which I kind of find sad because I feel that if we could make Spanish language books, or let's say books in general, more accessible to the Hispanic community, particularly those that are students, not only they'll be able to have access to books for free, but at the same time, it will motivate them to bring books, leave books, and at the same time, it promotes literacy because, like I mentioned, I see that many Hispanic children are struggling even with English, let alone Spanish. And a lot of it has to do with socioeconomic issues. Like, many on the far right say Hispanic children don't succeed because they don't value an education, and I digress. Many Hispanic children want to have an education and want to move forward, but from experience, when I was going through the public school system, I don't know how it is now, but I remember back then the teachers, particularly if you were a student of color, particularly if you were brown, they would treat you differently if you were, let's say, a student that is Asian or a student that is Caucasian. So I have always seen that and I've had this in many of my workshops, that in order to dispel that stereotype, we need to change the way we view reading and education in general, and we need to make it not only a priority, but at the same time a focus of our survival. Because the way we are stigmatized as people, we're stigmatized as a community that is not educated, doesn't value education, and we don't care. So I try to promote education and reading, and I've even given many books to many children, to get them to read. It doesn't have to necessarily have to be books on education. It could be books on cartoon characters. It could be stories of different figures that piques their interest, because I want to see them succeed, because when every Latino, Hispanic student, child succeeds, the Hispanic community succeeds as a whole. So that's why I feel that the more we promote literacy to the Hispanic children, the better it is economically, socially, academically it is for the Hispanic community later on for future generations.
I agree totally, and that strength also also strengthens everyone in the society. I There are certainly people who do not see it that way, but I do know that when we lead with strengths, all of us are better off. All boats lift.
Absolutely. And I believe that the more united a community is, the more social stability it is for a society as a whole. And
I
and I
agree.
and I believe that the only way that one could have a better life or promote stability is through education. And I feel that education starts through books, and I feel that the more children of Latino background have more access to books, I feel that the generation will start to change. They'll start to prioritize education, and I could see
Mhm.
social changes within the Hispanic community, and that's something I really like to see. Another question I was going to ask you, Mrs. Fish, is
Mhm.
have you ever held like not necessarily events, but have you ever, because I know that back then when I was going to university years ago, my professors, depending on the topic of what it was, they would bring like people in from the outside and kind of have like a social experiment on how emphasizing on a particular method could improve society or can improve a product. So have you ever like done a type of social experiment where you have brought like maybe students or people from a marginalized community, and how they see the world and how they could have better access to better services, or even a better quality of life, or even better social justice?
Oh, of course. Um, I I want to tell you about a very stunning uh, workshop that we had at Cal State Northridge for faculty and administrators, and it was on racism and our experience at the university. And I worked with Dr. Mac Johnson at the time, who was the Associate Vice President for Graduate Studies, Research, and International Programs. And I was the Coordinator of International Programs. And I loved Dr. Mac Johnson. He was the best supervisor I've ever had at Cal State Northridge. And he was Black. I'm sorry to say that he has passed, but he was in this workshop, as well as many other people on campus from all different departments, all different cultures and races or colors and orientations. And at one point, the facilitator asked, who in this audience has been stopped by campus police or local police in the environs of the campus driving while Black?
Mm-hmm.
And my supervisor and another vice president who also was Black, and somebody else and somebody else and somebody, colleagues and faculty, stood up. And just that vision gave me such anger, frustration, and sadness for these incredibly valued members of our campus community to have had that experience. Of course, I am a white woman. and so I can understand that people may think I'm being soapbox or
Mm-hmm.
or soap like TV melodrama. That I'm not. What I'm saying is it's a tragedy when people are not valued for what they do every day and who they are in the community just because of color or because of language.
Mm-hmm. I could tell you from personal experience, particularly ever since I started my foundation, Spanish United. For the most part, it's been positive, but I've gotten a lot of backlash, like particularly when I have made statements in relation to the issue of ICE, in the issue of uh, many Hispanic people that are being kidnapped by immigration, or just particularly being called out for being Hispanic. I have received so much negative feedback. I've even had people tell me, that I should go back where I came from, and many people don't realize that that's feeding into the problem. Like I myself, I am born and raised in California. I'm Puerto
Yeah.
Rican, and as you know, Puerto
Mhm.
Ricans are U.S. citizens, and it doesn't matter if we're
Yes.
born on the island or born in the mainland. We are
Yeah.
U.S. citizens. But it's that stigma that people and the perception that people have of Hispanic people. Like, and there was even another situation I could tell you briefly where during the pandemic I was invited to speak on Zoom for UCLA. Like you remember that there was these protests with Israel and Palestine. The
Oh yeah.
students fighting.
Yeah. So.
So
Mhm.
one of the rules was people could express their opinions or concerns, but no insults. So I was also invited to speak because I'm also part Jewish. So
Mhm.
I spoke on the issue on public safety. Which that was the topic of the UCLA this discussion. But I noticed that on the Zoom conference, because you know that even when you're on Zoom, when someone is speaking, people can make comments or write messages. So I remember there was this particular individual that was being very prejudicial about me. So when the meeting was concluded, I thanked the moderator, and I said, "Mr. Moderator, I want to thank you for letting me be on this panel, but I want to bring to your attention this individual, that has been making very derogatory comments about my ethnicity and my background." And I just felt the hatred and the vileness of particularly those on the right, especially when it comes to those that they don't see in the same status as they are. Because just because I am a Hispanic Jew, many
Mhm.
many many
Mhm.
Jews don't look at Hispanic Jews as being the same for whatever reason. So
Mhm.
it's it,
Mhm.
and it's something that you know Hispanics, especially those that are mixed, have to deal on a daily basis. And I always tell my members that doesn't matter, what people say at you. We always have to have self-control, because that's the thing. Our people are stigmatized as being people that are quick to get violent. So I always want to encourage them to use their words instead of using their fists, because it will prevent tragedies. At the same time, it could also create dialogue. And it's the same thing with the Hispanic
Mhm.
students. Many Hispanic students get bullied for being Hispanic, for speaking Spanish, or even looking brown.
Mhm.
And I want to prevent these children from getting suspended, getting expelled, because unfortunately, every time when Hispanic students get into trouble, regardless is because of an injustice, the media or society says, that was a Hispanic student. They're violent. They get into trouble. There's no reason even to help them do better. So that's something that really needs to be addressed and needs to be challenged.
Yes, absolutely so. When anyone is otherized, they are marginalized. They become different from, and they aren't. They are different from, like everybody's different, and like each group has its own unique strengths, and each family has its own unique strengths. But there really is no no well, there's no biological basis for race in the first place. There's no biological difference in people called race that depends on color or language or any cultural characteristic. Um, so, so when I want to come back to the topic of literacy,
Mm-hmm.
before a child can even read, and with a parent who feels like they're not like able to read as well as they want to, and this could happen in any language. My grandfather from Indiana, who was white and English speaking, finished fourth grade, and so his reading ability was okay, but not really a lifelong love, right? And so when parents read to children, it can start for sure with a picture book and starting in your own language, describing the images in the picture book to the child, linking it to your own experience in life. And when they're old enough, asking them, have you ever seen this before? And what does it look like to you? How have you used it? So that the child feels like my ideas matter and my experience matters. And and that's what's critically important for a parent and a child to identify together and to reinforce. I told you before we started this show that I have a new grandson, and I'm very proud to say that his parents decided from day one this baby's going to get a book. So we have, I mean, not buy a book every day, I mean read at least one book a day. And we've been reading like 3 books every day, some, exchanging from a collection. And to speak to your good question about economics, families can pool their books. They can trade not only infant clothes, but baby books, so that a child can have more of an array of books available to him or her rather than having to buy books. There are also ways to use common things around the house as an object for a conversation and to talk about that object and what it can do, like a pencil and a piece of paper, or like a spoon and maybe, oatmeal. There are just everyday activities, sorting socks together and talking about color. All of those things are cognitive stimuli so that children become more interested in categorizing and looking at the characteristics of things. And that makes them feel more engaged in the family, have more of a role in the family, and also have more of a say in what happens in their lives.
Absolutely, 100%. I feel that the more family is involved in the child's development of the children, I think the better it is. Well, anyway, Jan, we made it to the end of our time, but I wanted to tell you
Good.
thank you so much for being a guest on our show, and for our listeners that are listening right now. Spanish United is on all social media platforms. We are on Spanish United Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and I know as X. We're also on YouTube. Anything that anyone wants to donate to Spanish United, we are nonprofit. Anything that's given is appreciated, is given to those that are in the community that are in need. As soon as I finish with the audio, I will email you the link that you could share it with your colleagues. And again, thank you so much for being on the show, Jen.
Thank you very much, Enrique. I really found it to be a pleasure to talk with you. Thank you.
Excellent. Have a wonderful day.